All right, everybody. Welcome to another amazing class of our top Wednesday night study into the parables. What are we on, like week 75? That's how it feels this week. It's only Wednesday. It feels like this week. Who was I texting the other day? On Monday. I said it really feels like this week has gone on for like 72 days. It's just been one of those weird weeks. It's just like time is just being very bizarre. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started as we continue on. And I'm putting Victor on the spot and telling he has to read. So you don't need to chant this. Just read it normal. But come stand right here so everyone can hear it and I can pick it up on the mic.
Okay. Gospel reading, Matthew 13, 24 to 43. Another parable he put before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed seeds among the wheat, and went away. So when the plants came up, bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the householder came and said to him, 'Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then has it weeds?' He said to them, 'An enemy has done this.' The servants said to him, 'Then do you want us to go gather them?' But he said, 'No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned. But gather the weeds into my barn.' Another parable he put before them, saying, 'The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs, and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches.' He told them then another parable. 'The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour, till it was all leavened.' All this Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophets. 'I will open my mouth in the parables. I will utter what has been hidden since the foundation of the world.' Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples came to him, saying, 'Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field.' He answered, 'He who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed means the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the close of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will at the close of the age the Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and throw them into the furnace of fire. There men will weep and gnash their teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who has ears, let him hear.'"
Thank you. Thoughts, questions, comments before I start talking? What do you think? It's kind of weird. We did 3 of them in this week. Just first thought on that. And the second thing is this is another one where Jesus explains what he's trying to say. At least he does for one of the parables, right? So any comments or questions before we get started?
I was thinking about the faith as small as a mustard seed turns into the greatest of shrubs. To me, the way that I take that is if you have just a little bit of faith, just a little bit, you plant it, you tend to it, and it explodes into something magnificent. That's what I gathered from that.
Okay. Yeah. We talked about this the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to continue to repeat this. This is the overarching theme of this class, is what is the purpose of this class? It's not to rehash any subject you guys couldn't already read in 1,000 other books. It's not a subject that you couldn't go listen to another more eloquent speaker than I am, let's just say, who could probably give a much more theological and break down every little part of it, right? These classes are meant to train us to be better, basically evangelizers to the community, right? And so the reason this direction of these parables are going in this way is to emphasize that, right? So we have 3 parables that all are together. conveniently together. One of those times I don't have to jump to a different parable. And all kind of have those similar themes of that spreading the gospel. But each of them maintains a different sort of aspect of that. Can you guys think about what that might be? Just going off of the first parable, which is the parable of the wheat and the weeds. Any thoughts? Don't all speak at once.
I don't really know too much about what to say for the first one because Christ broke it down pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was interesting that it said not to take the weeds out.
Speak a little louder so I can pick it up on there.
I think it was
And
interesting that it said not to take the weeds out, like, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if part of that is also answering the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Why doesn't God just wipe out all the evil people and keep the good people around? So if you've got a lot of those weeds, they might look like weeds now, but over time, they could become one of the good guys, like Saul of Tarsus becoming Paul, the apostle.
Yeah. Well, more than that. I mean, think about, well, let's just go off with that, right? So let's talk about that first a little bit. So, let's talk about this in a sense of a conversion of heart, right? Anybody remember what I say whenever somebody new, and I'm going to use Haddon as my guinea pig for this? What do I always say when somebody tells me that they're of some other faith? What's the one thing I always say?
You're always welcome.
I say that for them to come to church. But what do I say? Like, do you remember what I said to you when you told me you were Presbyterian?
Maybe.
Maybe? Does anybody know?
Come and see.
What's that?
Come and see.
Yeah, but that's not what I said. So I said this to your wife recently before she decided to become a catechumen. She told me she was Catholic.
And what did you tell her?
Well, I'm seeing if anybody remembers what I say to them.
Don't support a specific sports team and you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's close, right? As Victor's over there with that Eagles t-shirt on. Hey, by the way, thanks for Isaiah Rogers. Just saying. Yeah, but no, I always tell people. I say to them like they always will say something like, "Oh, I'm this faith," or "I'm that." I always go, "We can fix that."
Oh, yeah.
Remember now? We can fix that. You know? Here, let's play it out again really quick. Haddon. What are you?
Presbyterian.
We can fix that. See, that's right. We can fix that. So let's talk about change of heart and how that applies, because that's a good idea. That's a good perspective from this, right? Because this particular parable, I wouldn't have thought it in that way. So I think we should definitely delve into it because it's a little different, right? But let's talk about change of heart with regards to the parables, right? Everybody except for me in the church right now is either a catechumen, inquirer, or a convert. Okay? Like we have every group here. We have everything, and I'm the cradle. You know? All of you in some capacity had to have a change of heart. You had to change from your ways of who you were previously. Even like Haddon, who's inquiring and learning about orthodoxy, and like I said, we're going to fix him. He doesn't realize it. We're going to fix him, right? You know, even though like he's inquiring, like you're changing, right? You're trying to grow and grow closer to Christ, right? Like you all came from a previous life at one point. Anthony was Muslim at one point in his life. Then he was an evangelical. I'm trying to say. I remember Jason. I think you grew up Anglican. I thought you told me that.
No, actually I visited one.
Oh, okay. Well,
I never
that's
grew up in Sawyer.
okay. My mistake then. You know, I don't remember what you were, Nate, before.
Pentecostal.
Pentecostal. Oh, wow. Definitely need to be changed. And then you guys, both of you,
Seventh-day Adventist.
Seventh-day Adventists and
Charismatic.
charismatic. So we got a mixture of everything, right? You know. And here I am, like, you know, cradle, but even I had gone through that whole sort of crisis of faith thing. You know, I grew up very cliche Orthodox. You went to Pascha and you went to Christmas services and the occasional once a wild Sunday, right? You know, like they like to call them CEOs, the Christmas Easter Orthodox. You know, it was just a thing. It was a cultural thing, right? Because I was culturally Orthodox. And then high school came around, and I got very much involved in parish life. And then college happened, and well, college happened. I stopped going to church as much as I probably should. I was still involved, but second half of college, I kind of fell away a little bit because I had gotten very involved, very busy with school and other things, and kind of had a little bit of whether or not I still even wanted to be a Christian, actually, believe it or not. I was just struggling with that, right? And then, kept coming to church, mostly my mom telling me to go to church and stuff like that, because I was living with them, and they said, if you're going to live here, you have to go to church. I said, okay. So I started going again more regularly, and, well, God's got a funny sense of humor, because I'm a priest, so, the whole change of heart thing, right? Like, you can fall, like, so I can the reason I tell that is I cannot sympathize, I can relate to what you guys have all done, because you all came from different ways of life into this, right? You were changed, in many ways, if we think about it from this perspective of the world. The world is what? What did the fathers say about this? Do you know about this parable, what the fathers say about the world? The church fathers? Talk about the field as being the devil's field. And Christ comes in and basically takes it over, turns the bad ground into good ground, sows the seed, right, like that. But the devil's growing weed out there. That's the whole point of it. That could come off weird. But he's out there, sowing. Yeah, I realized how that came off when I said that. I'm not in Colorado anymore, okay? But it's, the devil plants his seed and sows his seed, and it grows up this thing, right? And he's wanting the deadness and the field to not be even though the field is Christ, he's gone in and basically taken it over, right? And destroyed it and made it where not good things grow from it, but bad things grow from it. And essentially, it takes somebody to come in and change that, right? And for all of you, there was something or someone, and when I say something, that could mean like prayer, struggle, spiritual struggle, and whatever it is, to make you want to change, right? We know with St. Paul, what was his big shining moment? Christ knocking him off a horse, or a donkey, I think it depends on the translation. Knocking him off, right? For others, there's something more than that, right? Some others, it's really easy. For let's just see. I'll just ask a couple people. Somebody just go. What was it that made you?
I was just tired, just beleaguered spiritually. I was beat down by submarine service and the Navy in general. My mental health was in the gutter. And one day I was just tired of sinning, and I was like, look, I know God exists. I know this beyond the shadow of a doubt. What am I doing with my life? And I just had I prayed. I had an aha moment where everything just clicked. And I was like, all right, I need to rehash my faith. How am I going to do it? And I was like, you know what? Let's start at the beginning. Who was the original church? Google said Orthodox Church. I found an OCA parish in Washington State at St. Elizabeth the New Martyr in Paulsbo, Washington. The rest is history.
Okay, so we're going to come back to that. You Googled. We're going to come back to that.
I'll say when I was about 13, 14 years old, I started having very wild manic depressive panic attacks, and ever since that started, I knew that I wanted to fix this issue, and I devoted myself to fixing that issue. And it took years on end. And around roughly 16, 17, I started noticing a repetition in my life of good and bad, and gifts that were given into my life and taken away. So I knew of a God. I knew that there was. I didn't doubt that there was. I didn't doubt that Jesus Christ was Lord. But it just kind of settled on my mind for a while, and then keep going, went through my phase of being just a degenerate pothead in high school, and then things started getting really bad in my relationship, and she kind of helped me propel myself into becoming better. Lo and behold, I'm all over Instagram and TikTok Orthodox starts popping up on my page out of nowhere, and I start listening to some fathers and pastors, and I just went to different churches, and all I kept doing was just debating with people and questioning things.
You don't come off like a debater, but
No,
you're
because
so
all
calm.
we would do is just try and guess, not debating, but guess. Nothing theological, more of an evangelical way of believing on how God has set our lives to be. And no one could give me answers ever. Then I started just keep listening to these podcasts, and then I run along. A friend that I just met that works at the gas station noticed my cross because I bought an Orthodox cross and invited me to hear.
Who was that?
That was, oh man, really bad names.
Is it braided?
Braden, yeah.
Really?
It was with Braden, yeah. I just go to that gas station
Okay.
every day, and I just became friends with him. He invited me here, and all my questions have been answered pretty much.
Okay. So let's come back to that. So you were invited. You Googled. Other Nate.
I was kind of same boat as him. I was in the military, and I did whatever I wanted.
Yeah, I know how it is.
I wanted to go back to church, and I tried to go back to the Seventh-day Adventist church, and I was like, there has to be something more than just singing and like a couple lines of scripture, and then go home. So I felt lost. Like I don't know, it just didn't feel right. My buddy started going to the Orthodox church, so he invited me, and for the longest, like, I'm not going to go, whatever. And then finally, he's like, no, I'll go check it out. I just never stopped going after that.
Okay.
I love it.
So you just wanted to come check it out.
Check it out, yeah.
Okay. So we'll come back to that too. Anybody else want to jump in or say anything?
I went to an evangelical bookstore, and I found a great book by some guys I trusted, Michael Horton and a few Presbyterian Reform guys, and they were going to debate this Orthodox. I said, great, let's see them crush those Orthodox. And then it seemed the Orthodox were crushing them back, and I had to start researching for myself. That's how I started exploring.
So you
Orthodox.
watched the debate.
I read the debate.
You read the debate. Okay, Haddon needs to read that debate.
It would just open my eyes, and then I started researching online and reading all these books that I didn't know were available for the church.
Right.
That's how I became Orthodox. Before that, I was reading the Bible to convert Christians to Muslims.
It's an interesting thing. We'll come back to that maybe too, but let's stick on that. So debate, you read a debate. Did you want to, either one of you want to say something? I know you're in a different situation, right? But I still want to hear what brought you to learn about Orthodoxy too. Because I'm going somewhere with all of this. And for those who are listening, they're probably going, where's this going? Trust me, this is going somewhere. But did you want to say anything? Or what made you interested in Orthodoxy?
Well, I mean, to begin with, you always see like these coolish videos on like Instagram and stuff like that of Orthodoxy. But also, Kat Von-D, her videos on Orthodoxy is actually really neat.
She that singer that's converting or something? Yeah, I've heard about her.
But also, it was the night of my graduation party. I knew Sarah was Orthodox, but I didn't know anything about Orthodoxy other than that. And she was like, okay, we'll have to go. It's Pascha tonight. And then I was like, can I come?
Okay.
And then we showed up, and we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
Okay, so to save some time on this, because I also want to allow Victor to say his too, but so you basically came because somebody else was going, and you were invited here by somebody else, similar to Jason's story, although you came in a different way, right? Victor, did you want to say what brought you or got you interested in Orthodoxy?
Yeah, it was.
Wasn't it a girl? Just kidding.
That happened a little later, but
I'm teasing you.
what put me on the journey, honestly, I was just seeking truth because, I mean, all my life I had kind of dealt with doubts and questions about what I believed and why I believed certain things, and I'd always come to an answer, but I've never really been tested on those things.
Mm-hmm.
So in my formal evangelical life, I was doing a lot of missionary work, and I got to talk and dialogue with a lot of people that weren't of my faith, and some even agnostic or atheists. And they would bring up a lot of questions that would leave me thinking and so it would stun me on a lot of things. I'd be like, I don't really know the answer to that. I don't know how to answer that question truly, or how do I know what I know? And I started to look for answers online as, a lot, the funny thing is like, this is normally the story of someone that like deconverts or leaves Christianity. They think that they got the answers, they get challenged on it, and they don't know the answers, they leave. They actually just push me to go deeper and want to know the reasons for it and the answers for why I believe what I believe in. And along the way, I discovered Orthodoxy, and I was like, I think I've heard about this before, but I didn't know anything about it. And I realized that the Orthodox kind of had the best answers out of any other denomination or group that spoke to me the best.
And how did you look for it?
Really just online, looking at videos and some debates here and there.
Now,
it's still a process, but
what's interesting, what you guys said here, this is where I'm going with this, right? So the field is the world. It's all out there, right? And then we could go into this whole thing about calling you all weeds, right, at one point, that were knocked off your horses and came in. But your stories really didn't come off like that, right? Your stories were where you either were curious because you were going down a dark path and you felt like you needed to get things right. You Googled it or looked into it through online means, or you had someone invite you to church, right? In other words, the curiosity was always there, right? So in the sense of it is, it's you were all seeds in that field. You just need to be cared for properly, right? And for the the ones here who are already converted, right? Like you're at that next step. But those who are catechumens and inquirers, you're still being, kind of cared for. You notice when you plant anything in a garden or such like that, they don't all grow the same way. They have to be cared for differently, right? Different plants have to be cared for in different ways, and you have to approach each plant in a different way, right? So that gets us into the next part of this scripture reading with the parable of the mustard, right? And all that kind of stuff. And how does that look in terms of like where you guys, where's the care in that, right? Something that often gets, and I'm big on context, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I'm big on context. Something that often gets overlooked in history is how Christians were able to spread the gospel, right? They didn't just spread the gospel the way that like you expect people to spread things nowadays, right? Everything is either this or that. There's no other and what I mean by that is like when you're talking about the gospel today, right? When people say, how do you spread the gospel? It's usually understood now as it's either done strictly online, that's this, or it's done like some guy on the street is with on a street corner yelling out Bible verses and telling people they're going to go to hell, right? Mm-hmm. Neither one of those methods really worked when it came to building the church. Were it utilized back in the early church? Yeah, there were street preachers in some capacity. Paul's a good example of that, speaking at the Parthenon to people, being in that sense, right? But they didn't really have the internet. That would have been different, sure, right? They had the social circles. That's where there was some parts of that, right? But that wasn't what took care and kind of spread the gospel and got people to convert to Christianity. What was it that got them to convert? Does anybody know?
Curiosity.
Not curiosity. Sure, maybe curiosity played into it a little bit, but that wasn't what convinced people of the gospel.
Living the example.
Let's go with that. Living with the example. So you're on the right track. So yes, living with the example, huge factor to that. What does that living by the example look like, though?
Humility, demonstrating what Christ would actually be. Because then people...
What does that look like, though? Like, give me an example. You're a first century Christian. What does living by the gospel look like?
Going to the Colosseum with happiness? To be killed?
That's part of it. That definitely factored in. That definitely messed with people psychologically.
Well, let me think about it.
Let me ask you this. Hold on just a second here. So, besides that, we'll fix you. What's the other thing I always tell people?
You're always welcome.
Right. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? When I make a comment like that, I've been accused of this, right? I've had people. I had a lady at my old parish. I won't name her. Obviously, it's not really important, right? Who used to tell me she did not like that I said that. The reason why she said that was because I sounded like I was promoting LGBT stuff. I'm like, really? That's what you took from that? Like, you're always welcome means I'm pro-LGBT? Like, I am the most right-wing person you might ever meet, but I'm apparently pro-LGBT? Yeah, I'm not that, okay? You know? I don't have a problem with people, right? I love every person, right? And that's what we're called to do as Christians. But I don't agree with the lifestyle one bit, you know? And I mean, that's one of the things that I say we have to fight back against. So we got that impression, right? But upon further conversation with that person, why they felt that way is because when you say something like, you're always welcome, well, today's society sees that as, that means you can live however you want. You can do whatever you want because, you know, love is love and God is love and therefore everything is perfect and sunshine and rainbows and, you know, and equality and everybody's perfect and basically relativism acted out, right? That kind of statement could definitely come off that way because when you tell someone they're always welcome, if somebody came into this church right now and, you know, we're gonna just describe this person as, you know, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face full of makeup. It calls themselves Amanda. No pun intended on that one. I didn't realize I said that until I said that. You probably look at that person and go, get out, right? That would probably be the first reaction to most people. But I wouldn't tell them to get out. I would say, you're welcome here. You should come here. Because you just said it, right? This is a place to be healed. You know, I can't remember who the priest was that said it. I'm sure somebody, if they were to put something in the comments on this, would probably say something along the way. It was this guy. I can't remember the name of the priest off the top of my head. But he got asked, I think a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, it was some article I read, and said, do you have any racists in your church? And the priest responded back with, I hope so that they could be healed. Right? That's the mindset behind you're always welcome. I hope a transgender individual walks into this church. I do, so they can be healed. I hope a white supremacist walks into this church so they can be healed. I hope an Edmonton Oilers fan walks to this church so I can tease them about them losing 2 years in a row. But even then, I hope that they can be healed, right? We can definitely heal them with that. We can fix that, okay? But you hope that they can be healed. Everybody's healed. They're always called to be welcome. Now, not to get too sidetracked on that, but how does that look with regards to the early Christians? How did the early Christians have that mindset of you're welcome? What did they do? This was their greatest evangelism, by the way. This was them basically living the mustard seed, the parable of the mustard seed. What were they doing? What do you do with a garden?
You tend it.
What's that?
You tend the garden.
You tend the garden, but even further than that.
You plant
How
seeds.
do you tend the garden?
You take out weeds, you water it, you add fertilizer.
You kind of were on the right path when you were saying, you know, they lived like Christians. What did that look like, though? What does it look like living like a Christian?
Being charitable.
Charitable.
Being kind in
Kind.
the face of unkindness. Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Those are three things that the Romans were not used to seeing. What else?
Humble.
Well, humble, yes, but they were not used to seeing that either.
Courageous.
Humble themselves before people.
Okay, yeah, let's go with that. So humble themselves, right? They didn't have to win every argument. They just had to show like it wasn't that important, right? There were bigger things, right? That true humility, right? Even more, I could take it even further and say they humbled themselves by going into this arena without fighting back. And that's a hard thing, because especially nowadays, with everything going on in the world, it really is tempting. And I'm starting to kind of lead on this side of, we got to do more to fight back against it. I'm not saying physically fight back, but we've given the demons too much leeway, And I see people, pushing back against that, right? It's why we push so much here to do more with the parish, because there's a nasty world out there. But let's take it even further. There's one more thing I'm looking for.
They love their enemies sacrificially.
They love their enemies sacrificially. That's true. That's part of the humility part. But even more than the loving of the enemies, they saw their enemies as what? We just heard about this on Sunday with the gospel reading.
Made in the image of God.
Made in the image and likeness of God, correct? And they saw them as, rhymes with Tabor.
What was that?
Neighbor.
Neighbor, there you go. They loved them as neighbor, because what does that mean to love them as neighbor? They saw them, made in the image and likeness of God. The early Christians' greatest evangelism, right? And this is one of those kind of things that I've had really interesting conversations with my wife's side of the family. Those who don't know or who are Mormon. And I said, one thing Mormons get right that we don't get right today as Orthodox Christians is that if you are in need, I'm just going to break this down for you guys a little bit here, okay? If you needed to go and get groceries and you had no money to get groceries, you call up your local ward and they will either A, give you the directions to their pantry, or B, they'll bring it to you. Okay, now I know that there are Christians who will do those things, and we try to do those kind of things, right? But we don't have that in our culture today like we used to have it, right? Like when I talk about how organized they are on that compared to us, all right? When my wife's aunt was going through cancer and on her dying days, this was in St. George, Utah. They said to her husband and to her kids, here's the address to our pantry, and go down and get whatever you need and stuff like that. And you go down to this pantry in St. George, and it looks like a Costco. It doesn't look like a little pantry. We had a pantry in Callahan, right? Little pantry like the size of our hall, maybe. Okay? And that was, we're talking like the Costco-sized pantry is insane. Okay? And I just said go whatever you want. So if you wanted to go home with 12 bottles of milk, you could take 12 gallons of milk. I don't mean bottles, but 12 gallons of milk. Take whatever you needed. Right? And I say that because I took 12 gallons of milk, because she also ran a daycare. So it wasn't like they were just drinking 12 gallons of milk. They're not milkaholics. Okay? She had a daycare. She had a lot of little kids, and Lindsay was working with her and all that kind of stuff, and they were trying to help because she was going through all this, right? But that was a big thing, because milk's expensive when you have to buy a lot of it. And these other things are expensive. So this was a great resource for them, right? Now, I bring that up in particular because that level of charity and that level of commitment to somebody else, right? And these are people, yes, they have a vested stake in that sense of it, right? But the early Christians had that same vested stake in people, and these are the kind of people who are willing to kill them, who are willing to throw them into the arenas and kill them. And that's a really important thing for us to think about here, because they were towing the mustard seed, right? They were towing the garden and keeping the garden and growing up the wheat, right? And spreading this gospel simply by the fact that they were willing to go and do it in whatever, circumstances. And let's put this into a little bit of other context here, right? Think about it from this perspective of first century, or prior to the first, basically around Christ's time, right? First century, right, when he's preaching in his early ministry, right? And stuff like that. And he's telling these people who are his disciples and those people he's interacting with, that you have to go out here and spread this message. And using this parable, this example of saying, you're going to go out there, and it's going back to the first parable here, right? That you're going to go out into this world that's full of weeds, and you got to think about, the desert world that they were living in at that time, right? And everything that imagery that they were experiencing, and telling them, and you might be doing it in not only harsh weather, people that don't want anything to do with you, okay? People who are going to kill you, right? And you have to be willing to do it, regardless of all of those circumstances. Anybody who's ever towed any kind of garden or done any kind of work with that kind of stuff, if you were told to do that in a hurricane, you'd probably laugh at whoever told you. Like, go clean, when you get hurricanes out here, go tend to a garden during a hurricane here. That's essentially what Jesus was telling them to do. Go care for a garden during a hurricane, right? And that's a hard thing to do, because this is where I'm leading at with this, right? What does that mean for us in a world that doesn't want us out there preaching the gospel? We just saw this happen a couple of weeks ago with the assassination of a political commentator in Charlie Kirk, right? That the world doesn't want that, right? So what does that mean? Like, you're going to be out there preaching the gospel to these people, and you're called to essentially love those people anyway and serve those people anyway. and do everything you can for those people anyway. Even though the world's not your friend, right? A few of you talked about dark pasts and kind of the struggle and things like that, where you were like, oh, I was in this really bad place, I started looking, right? You're not unique. You're not unique. There's a lot of young men and women today, I think more men than women, who are in that same world. And they only have one outlet to go to, the internet. Because they stay mostly within their own circles. They stay at home. And they don't have people who care for them. Now, remember a while back, I think you were there, Jason, when I said this, right? Like, nobody's equipped to argue online with people about stuff, right? Why did I say that? I mean, better yet, here's a better question. I'll bring this over to I'm gonna pick on Haddon here for just a second, okay? Why is it that I don't? If you were to say, let's have a debate on Christianity, why would I not want to engage with you on that?
Because you could turn me away.
Could turn you away, even more than that. Why else?
Because I think there's also a time and a place for that. Whenever you're, especially someone new, I mean, it's not really something that you should do.
Okay. And what else? I mean, we could have a debate, right? We could. Like Anthony talked about when he went and read a debate. That's what got him interested in orthodoxy, right? And he was reading the Bible to convert people to Islam at one point, right? You know, like you have a goal in mind, you have something in mind, but I'll take it even further on this respect, right? So I talked about, you weren't here the last couple of times we did this, but we talked a little about this. If we're going to have a debate about something, and we're going to engage in these kind of things, what are we trying to accomplish with this debate? And further on that question, and this is really kind of a redundant, or not redundant, a rhetorical question. What do I need to know about your argument to be able to have that debate, right? That's where I'm really going up with this. I'll say this. The people in this church right now probably know more about the Presbyterian church than I do, okay? Like, if you and I were to have a debate about Presbyterianism, I would probably sit there and go, what were my conversations like in seminary? I had a classmate of mine who was studying there, doing the MA, and everything like that, because he was interested in the church fathers, and he was a Presbyterian, going into the Presbyterian, not priesthood, you'll call it a priesthood, but the pastorship, what do you call it?
I mean, sure.
Pastorship, does it have a name?
Ministry.
Ministry, okay. Like a minister, Presbyterian minister, right? And I could relate some of those comments back, but I would need to actually know what I'm going into, right? I'm not equipped for that, right? And the purpose of that, what I'm saying that is, you see what the world is like out there. You can't have a debate if you're not ready to have that debate. I can't have that debate. Now, if we were to have a debate on Mormonism and Orthodoxy, I could have that debate, right? If we had a debate on Orthodoxy and Catholicism, I could have that debate. You know, if we had a debate on Orthodoxy and science, I could have that debate, okay? Right? I know about those subjects, and that's the key here, right? Because the thing about the mustard seed, this is where I wanted to go with this, and even goes with the parable of the leaven, right? Is it's important to know what you're talking about. It's important to know who you're going into because, and this is the real build-up here, right? 99% of the time, you just need to simply live the Christian life and really live the Christian life, okay? But you need to have a good foundation of what that looks like, right? Because people are going to see you for what you are. They're going to see you for what you are. You need to be equipped in all things. I don't mean you to be a great speaker and a great debater. In fact, actually, I'm saying the opposite of that. It sounds like I'm saying I'm flipping the switch. It's like you need to be somebody who can debate really well and have all these deep, serious conversations. In reality, what I'm saying is that that's just one thing, And that's the most minor thing that you need to have. But you need to be like equipped fully to grow these kind of things. I said people are always welcome here. I would love every person in this church to come, right? Because this is where they're healed, right? That's one aspect of evangelism and bringing people to church. The other aspect of it is being able to give them the substance of what it looks like. And so understanding what this is about, right? Being able to properly care for the garden, right? Being properly prepared and knowing what a weed looks like and knowing what the proper flower looks like, the proper plant looks like, and knowing what to do to care for that particular proper flower, right? If I just gave you a random mustard seed and said, do something with this, you need to know what you're doing with that, right? We can throw it into the ground, but you need to be able to know how to care for it. And so what does that mean? What am I really telling all of you to do? Does anybody know?
Tend the garden.
Tend the garden, but learn how to tend the garden. I keep saying this, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. People are going to get tired of hearing this, but it needs to be said. To learn how to properly have a conversation or debate or bring people in, you have to be able to do two things. You have to first know what you're talking about, and two, you've got to be willing to serve and see those people otherwise. So you have to live the faith. You have to be essentially a walking saint, right? You can't come in with all of your, anger or all your frustration. And if you are angry and frustrated, you can't let people see that, right? You have to show them love. You have to show them what it looks like. You have to make them feel like, hey, if I'm in need, right? Somebody asked me this the other day. How do I deal with my family who's sees that I'm Orthodox now and doesn't know how to respond to it? I said, well, what you do is you act Orthodox. You didn't become Orthodox just for the fact that you could read the Bible a certain way and you get to stand during liturgy and cross yourself and take communion. There's more to it than that. You got to live that. They have to see you as, hey, you know what? My Orthodox son or my Orthodox cousin is, or my Orthodox brother or sister or whoever it is, that's the most forgiving person in my family. That's the most loving person. That's the person who calls, if I have something going on, that's the first person I call. Because I know they'll come and help me out. Right? That's where the tether, or the taking of the garden, and properly caring for the garden, really actualizes itself. Right? That's where the mustard seed grows into the mustard plant and produces the life that it needs to produce and grows. Because the early Christians didn't start, and the thing about this other thing with this parable, which we really didn't talk too much on, right? And that starts out small and grows throughout the entirety of the garden with one little seed, right? When it's properly cared for. Well, that's how the early church spread. The people lived like Christians. They were examples of what that looked like. They knew what their faith meant. They knew what their faith believed. They were able to have conversations and debate and such like that. But they were equipped for all of it. And that's the key here. They were equipped for all of it. And they started out small and they kept growing because people are drawn to that. They are drawn to what looks good and holy, right? When I said the thing about the Mormons and their food pantry, right? They're very good at getting people to become Mormon, despite the fact that the theology is wackadoodle, completely wackadoodle. All right? Hashtag wackadoodle. Okay? It's all nuts, right? But they're very good at getting people to convert, right? Because they know their faith for the most part. Most of them do evangelize, and they live it in some aspects of it when it comes to things like the food pantry. You could say that there's some issues with the way that the cult personalities are within and some of the negativity stuff like that, right? But those are kind of things that they're very good at glossing over because they can hide it with all the good that they do, right? And in some aspects of it too, I can make this kind of comment here and say this, right? We don't talk about Paul's mistakes in his life. We only talk about the good things he did, right? We don't talk about Paul as the bad person. We only talk about St. Paul as the good person, right? That's kind of the approach that they use. You don't need to know about our bad people in our lives. You need to only know about the good that we do, right? That's kind of a tangent in a sense, but I want to make it clear on all of this is that little bit grows because those people carry themselves with a holiness. And we are called to carry ourselves with that same level of holiness. Right? I keep talking about how we're this little church here in Lincoln, and we're going to grow to 500 people. And then we're going to grow another church, and we're going to grow another church, and we're going to grow another church. Well, how does that happen? We have to live that. We have to be that. We have to see ourselves as, I can't just be the person who comes to church, does these a bunch of times, and goes home. For those who are listening on the audio podcast, crosses themselves a bunch of times and goes home. You know, priests constantly, of all different parishes throughout the country and the world, say liturgy doesn't stop. Or the church services don't end and you go out about your day. They keep going out those doors, right? Well, guess what? That also means to the 6 of you here too, right? You know, you come from a recruiter background, so a lot of this stuff probably sounds really familiar when they talk to you about recruitment, about going out there and talking to people all over the world, right? But another aspect of all that recruitment and growth is, how do you live that? How are you an example of that? Like I said, we can have those debates and we can have those conversations and stuff like that. We should have those conversations, because the thing is once you get them here, then you have to have those conversations. And that's where the debate part and knowledge part comes in, right? You know, someone tells you, hey, this is my church I go to. It's a really cool church. You know, they're not going to hear your it's a really cool church part. What they're going to see is, yeah, that's a cool church, but you're swear up a storm like a sailor. Why would I want to go hang out with that, to see that, right? So you have to live that. You have to be more than that. Essentially, you want to have that conversation with them and talk to them, because the thing about it is our faith is not simple. It's simple to live, but it's complicated at the same time, right? The joke of Orthodoxy is the most disorganized religion on the planet. Well, you know what? It's also the most complicated and simple religion on the planet too, right? It's complicated in the theology, right? But it's simple if you just live that theology, right? And Father Michael, I love how he said this a few months ago when I was on vacation. He made this comment saying that real catechism is living the liturgy and coming to liturgy, right? Well, real Christianity is living the faith out in the world. And that's what I want you guys to take from this, right? You can sow out to the, or sow, that sow is not the right word. You can tend to the mustard seeds that you are. You are all the mustard seeds. You are also those who are the tendons of those mustard seeds, right? You can grow the little pockets into a big plant if you act as good seed and not as bad seed. You can easily in this world become a weed. You can easily fall into the sense of that, thinking you're a good seed going out there. But if you're not trying to be a good seed, the only thing you're going to sprout is weeds, you know? But there's a thing that and I'll end it on this, and then we can have some more conversation about this, and then we'll switch to the question and answer off-topic section. But you often hear people say this online. I hear this all the time, and it drives me nuts when people say this comment, which is, I would be a Christian if not for their followers. How often do we hear that?
All the time.
All the time. Well, you know what? Be the follower. Instead of them saying, I would be a Christian if not for the followers, just say, I should be a Christian because of their followers. That's what the early Christians practiced. They saw along the lines of that. That's what we're called today to practice. Every Christian throughout the centuries who's truly been an Orthodox Christian or truly been a Christian. I think you even made the comment of saying there were good Christians and outside of other denominations who lived that. Right? Mother Teresa is a good example of that. You know, to this day, she's still seen by even the most crazy people still see her as a holy person. Right? You know, because she was the example of what a Christian should look like. We're called to do the exact same thing. That's really what this is all about tonight, is how do we look like that? What can we do to be that? And if you have to ask yourself, well, I'm not doing a great job at that, well, fix it. So that being said, questions? And then we can switch over to the other questions. I know people like to ask other things unrelated to this talk, but questions?
In order to fix it, you cannot do it of your own power. How do you draw upon the grace power necessary to fix it?
What do you mean you can't do it by your own power?
That means I don't have the capacity of my own self to live in Christ, I need special grace, I need special power from God.
Oh yeah, of course. God gives us that through the Holy Spirit, right? You know? But it's also, you have to do it, right? You have to trust in God. You know, you have to trust that God's giving, here's a better way of looking at this, okay? So, all of you are here because God brought you here, okay? You are all here because you want to do more. You want to be better. You don't want to just live your life being a lukewarm Christian, as St. John Chrysostom likes to say, right? You're not just going through the motions. Who here actually wants to just go through the motions? No hands? Nobody wants to just, right? So to your question, to your answer, I would say is well, of course, but you already have that. Because you're simply being here, you're saying, I'm here, I want to do this, I want to be better, I want to live that, I want to be that example that Father Stephen's telling me to be, right? So you have to trust in God on that. And you have to understand that God's given you that already. He's put you there. It's the old thing of the old joke that goes, the guy's on the desert island, and the a boat comes and the guy says, no, God will save me. And then another boat comes and it says, no, God will save me. And then another boat comes and he says, God will save me, right? And then the guy dies and goes to heaven and says, why didn't you save me? And Jesus says to him, I sent you 3 boats. Like, you have that, right? By simply coming here. Even Haddon, who's an inquirer kind of stuff. And even other Nate and Victor, right, who are catechumens, right? They have that by coming here, because God's bringing them in that direction, right? So the answer I would say is that God's already given us that. He's given us that through the Holy Spirit, His promise, right? And here's the beautiful thing about it, right? Because it's another thing. There's that meme that is on there that likes to make the joke of saying, compares and saying like your theological argument, versus my 2,000 years of theology and church fathers and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, the beautiful thing about it is we have every example laid out for us. We have it through the scriptures, we have it through the church fathers, we have it through sermons and classes, we have it through so many things, right? And really, it's just lean on that. Lean on the things that we have. That's what we're called to. The boat's right there waiting for us to get on. You just have to decide whether or not you're going to get on it or not. But you have to make that effort. It's literally the whole, you can bring the horse to water, but you can't make it drink, but you have to take the drink. You have to choose to take the drink. That's where God gives us that free will to do so. So, really my answer to you is you already have that God-given grace to go out there and do it because you're here right now and you want to get better, right? Anthony, you're the oldest person here in the church right now, and even you are called at that age to go out there and do that. And you're doing that. You're doing it in a lot of ways, right? And the same thing goes to the rest of you guys. You guys are here, And for those who will listen to this later on online and such like that, hopefully it brings them here. Hopefully it gives them interest in it. And then, it maybe encourages them to come and say, I want to check this out, right? And that's the whole thing, right? We are doing that through these talks, through these conversations, through these classes, is being that, right? That's really what my answer is to your question. A good answer? You're nodding. I'm like, I don't know if that's a good answer or not. Anybody else have a question about this? What I talked about? And then we can switch to the other class, or the other part of the class. No? All right, let me pause this and we'll start to the other one. This makes my editing a little easier.